thinking real hard.
Thinking.
What is up? It is Premed Office Hours episode. My thing's too small, so I can't read it. Whatever episode it is.
160.
160. That's crazy talk. I am Ryan Gray, Dr. Ryan Gray, the crazy guy that comes to you lots and lots here on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all of those places. I've written some books. I host some podcasts, and now I get to chat with you all today and two of my good friends. We have Dina with us today, former senior admission officer at Stanford and assistant director of advising at Brown's SMP program. Welcome, Dina.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you. You are one of our newest advisors and have been working with students one-on-one. What is that transition like for you to go from the admission side to now the advising side, or back to the advising side?
I was on the advising side before I was on the admission side. So I am very happy to be working with students again, but now I have a totally different perspective, having seen what goes on in admissions. So I think I can help students maybe a little differently than I was able to before. So it's good.
Yeah, we love it. We love having you. So thank you for being here. We also have Rachel Grubbs, co-founder at Mapped and Premed and MCAT test prep expert for lots and lots of years. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. I haven't done one of these in a few weeks, I think. So it's great to be back at Premed Office Hours.
Yeah. So if you are new here and you're catching us on Instagram, you're catching us on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever, we are typically here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, here to answer your questions, just whatever you have. We typically take the questions directly from YouTube, which is premed.tv. That'll take you to our Medical School HQ YouTube channel. So go check it out over there to ask your questions. Before we jump into questions today, I want to remind everyone that the whole Medical School HQ team will be at MappedCon in Baltimore, October 6th through 8th. We are starting to sell more and more tickets, so go get your tickets before we sell out. It is fantastic. We're hoping for a lot of amazing pre-med, pre-PA, pre-health students. We have tons of great sessions starting Friday night with a non-traditional pre-med night. We have a full day of programming Saturday, and then Sunday morning until about 1 or 2 p.m. We also have lots of workshops like suturing workshops, splinting workshops, CPR training, all kinds of amazing fun stuff. The best part about it, though, not meeting with me or Dina or Rachel or any of the other amazing team that we have, it's going and interacting with our exhibitors, the people at the medical schools, the PA schools, the podiatry schools, all of those amazing places, the recruiters at those schools, the people who want to meet you and learn about you and where you can learn about the school and hopefully make some connections that will make some magic happen that may lead to an interview and hopefully an acceptance. So go to mappedcon.com right now to go save your ticket, October 6th through 8th in Baltimore, Maryland. Beautiful Inner Harbor area. Fantastic place. So that's it. And maybe we'll give away a ticket today. What do you think?
I like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll give away a ticket for a really great question.
Yeah.
Thought-provoking one that's going to help all the listeners, not just you. We'll look for that great question.
So if you can be in Baltimore October 6th through 8th and you want a free ticket, ask some good questions today. We'll give away a ticket. All right, let's rock and roll. JB asks, I am curious about the DO timeline. If I submitted primary 619, verified 624, and have turned, I need to adjust my Zoom, turned in around 10 secondaries, does that mean I'm on time or is this considered late? Just comparing to MD. The anxiety of the timeline is one of the biggest stressors that students have, Rachel. And it's just like, what do I do? I'm super late. If I don't submit within the first 30 milliseconds of the application cycle opening, I'm late and I'm doomed to failure for the rest of my life, and all of my parents' concerns is going to come true.
It feels that
What
way
do you say to
sometimes.
poor JB?
Yeah, JB, I think you're in great shape. So one of the interesting things about the DO timeline is it both starts earlier but tends to run a little longer than the MD timeline. So although you could have, in theory, submitted your primary for a COMIS as early as May 4th, mid-June is still great, right? I typically say just treat your DO timeline about the same as your MD, with the big difference being, exactly as you just put here in writing, verification happens a lot more quickly. So with both DO and also for anyone who's applying Texas, you should expect those secondaries very soon. So one of the things we often talk about is the importance of pre-writing secondaries. And what we're usually referring to there is pre-writing them in that window for AMCAS, where you might submit your primary, June 1st or June 7th or something. And then even if you were verified very quickly, until June 30th, you won't get any AMCAS secondaries. So there's a window there that you can use. But at this point, anyone who submits a primary for an MD program, whether or not they're verified, might be getting secondaries. And as you've seen, here it is, you were verified June 24th, you've already turned around 10 secondaries. So you can get them very quickly. So to me, it's like, you don't need to fixate on every single little moment if you have the big picture right, which I think you do, which is submitting primaries early helps you get secondaries quickly, and turning around secondaries quickly helps you be in line to get early interview invites. So you've got the big picture right, you're in great shape.
Yep. Love it. Shrey asks, I just started research, but the labs I do research in have PhDs. I heard that med schools look more favorably on letters from an MD PhD. Should I leave these labs and join other ones with MD PhDs? Dina, coming from a super well-respected school like Brown and Stanford, where research may or may not be looked at a little bit more highly, what do you think about this? To me, this sounds like hogwash. It's like you're just a PhD? Yes. Like, no.
Yeah. I agree. I think it doesn't really matter. What matters is what you're doing in terms of research, and what type of program you're applying into. If you're applying into an MD PhD program and your research is heavily based on something that is significantly intertwined in medicine, then maybe. But I wouldn't switch labs in order to do that. I just think that the type of research, the dedication to that research and that lab, the longevity of what you're doing is more important.
Yep. Impact.
Yes, impact.
Awesome. Yeah, just to go back to that question kind of is very similar to the questions that we get from, like, who should I ask for a letter of recommendation from? It's like, should I ask this person who is a tenured professor, emeritus, fancy words, who doesn't really know me much, or should I get one from my professor who isn't known but knows me intimately? It's like, always go with the person who's going to write a stronger letter. Yes. It's not the titles that matter.
Exactly.
All right. How's my sound, by the way, for you all? You hear me okay, Dina and Rachel? Everyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You sound a little different than usual, but I can't articulate why.
It's I'm using a different mic, but it's still a really good mic. It's just different. John asks, taking the MCAT 819 and applying this cycle. I know it is late in this cycle, but thoughts on this timeline? More timeline questions. Rachel, you're a timeline person.
I like to talk about timelines a lot.
Yeah. I mean, what's the option?
Exactly. What's the option? So, John, you're taking the MCAT August 19th, so you're not going to get your scores back until September 19th, 20th or so. You know it's late in the cycle, so you already know that. So what are my thoughts on this timeline? Well, my thoughts are, by the time your application is complete at the earliest, it's going to be mid-September, right? I don't know how you're doing on secondaries. I don't know how you're doing on primaries. Hopefully you figured out a way to balance your MCAT prep with continuing to work through those things, making sure your letters of rec are all in, making sure transcripts are in, because no school is going to actually consider you for an interview until your entire application is complete. So by you making the choice to stay in this cycle, you're just saying, I'm okay, right? I mean, I don't know your situation. I don't know how much time you have. I don't know how much money you have, but you're saying, I'm okay with applying later. I'm okay with the fact that there might have been a couple rounds of interviews offered before I'm even eligible to consider for an interview. Do I know people who've taken the MCAT in August and gotten into med school the same cycle? Yeah, I've actually known a few people who took the MCAT in January and got in the same cycle. It's not impossible. It's just that the later you wait, the fewer interview seats there are. So, you just have to decide, is it worth it for me to do it, to spend all this money and time and energy for this cycle? Or is it better for me to just focus on the MCAT and apply next cycle? It sounds like you've already made up your mind. So you just got to go in understanding that it's a competitive process. And for you, you've made it a little bit more competitive.
Yep. Black winter. I'm going to be a freshman pre-med and just started looking into medical schools. My question is, what should I be looking for when choosing what medical school is right for me? Dina, this is an easy answer, right? We have the wonderful U.S. News and World Reports, which puts out a list that says, here are the top medical schools. So that's what to look at, right?
Oh boy. No, that's not. First of all, I assume Black Winter means they will be a freshman in college as a pre-med.
Yeah, I'm assuming.
So very early in the process, very, very early in the process, where you have not even taken your prerequisites, have not delved into research, clinical, volunteer work. Is this even the path for you? Are you going to change your mind over the next 4 years? There's just so many variables. I do think it's great to start looking into schools, but it's so far away that energy definitely can be poured into, all of the other things that go along with being a pre-med. If you are looking into schools, do not look at U.S. News and Reports, like Ryan said. You need to look for programs that align with what you want out of your medical education. So looking at mission statements, looking at research initiatives, looking at clerkships, the way that curriculum is structured, class size. Do you learn better in smaller groups? Would you be better at a medical school that has a class of 50 as opposed to 200? Those are all things that you need to take into consideration. Location, affiliated hospitals, just a lot. There's a lot, but I think doing that like in small batches over the next 4 years is probably wise, and pouring your energy more into all of the things you need to apply probably would take priority.
Yeah, I would recommend going and creating a free Mappd account right now over at mappd.com, mappd.com, where you can start doing some research on those medical schools. And I will change the camera here since I'm not shown. And you can start going and doing some research on those medical schools, start building a school list where you can start to see prereqs for each of those schools and where you're going and all of that fun stuff. So.
And MSAR, I will mention MSAR is always another tool that students can use and reference, which is part of WMC. But we have that here for you. So
right. So MSAR and ChooseEO are both great resources. We also, if you go through Mappd, we have a tool here that shows you lots about the med schools, shows you the prereqs, and you can bookmark them. So you can start to make notes on schools that are potential fits for you, and then even make notes about that school that are private to you. So Mappd is a great place to start.
Well,
I have one more comment.
That My Notes feature, Rachel, is your admin stuff. So that's not the student view.
I'm sorry. Sometimes I forget what I get and what students get. My bad.
Yeah, they can add notes above by the flag.
Here's their notes.
Yes.
They do have notes. Just I clicked the wrong one.
And using your pre-med advisor as well, you know, at your undergraduate institution, is making that connection, building that relationship. It can also help you a lot.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So Black Winter also asks, how do you suggest keeping track of hours, volunteer hours, clinical research, all of that fun stuff? Hey, mapped.
Mapped.
So you can track all of that for free. What is our code? I forget what the 30 days free. If you use the referral code 30 days free, all kind of one word, the number's 30 days free. You get 30 days free of Mapped Pro. Most of Mapped is free. Mapped Pro gives you access to chatting with our advisors. I'll switch the camera here. Switching back to talking with our advisors, and also you can start to interact with our My LORs feature as well.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the camera because I was looking for that code in the banners. Yeah. All right. Let's keep going.
Annie asks, thank you for hosting office hours. How do you recommend students triage secondaries? What kind of systems do you recommend? This is a unfortunate situation that many students have if they don't pre-write secondaries, or even if they do pre-write and then they don't get to enough pre-writing. That tidal wave of secondaries comes in, and then they're kind of stuck with, Dina, when a student has 10 secondaries staring them in the face that they need to write right now, my suggestion has always been start with like your top choice school, right? If you were to look at these 10 schools, which ones you want to go to the most, start with that one. And then you have 9 and do the same thing. Which one do you want to go to the most? Do you have different thoughts on how to potentially triage those?
I mean, I think it's different for everyone. And I think different tactics work for everyone. I like that tactic, Ryan. But I also recommend your state schools. So if you're applying in state, maybe try to get those out sooner than later. And also, it depends on, you know, are you the kind of person who needs to, you know, attack a task when it is presented to you and cross it off your list? Maybe just completing them as they come in, because ideally you want to get those secondaries in within a few weeks. So if you have, you know, they pile up quickly, and if you have them sitting there for longer, it just, it's like a domino effect. So I think attacking them by state school and by order of how they were received. I think, like you said, you know, going for a school that's your top choice is always great. But if it's a school that is getting, you know, 10,000 applications, what are the chances that yours is going to be read sooner than later? Whereas if you're really counting on that acceptance from a state school for the in-state tuition, to me, that takes priority.
Yep.
Rachel, you're muted, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say the only other thing I would add to that is lots of great tactics. To me, the most important one is that you pick one, right? This is an area where you can very easily get paralysis by analysis, right? You're just so overwhelmed. I don't know where to start, so I don't start. So don't overthink it. Pick a tactic, go.
Yep. Lion of God asks, will MappedCon be a recurring annual event? To be determined. It is very stressful putting on an in-person conference. And so we'll let you know.
Yeah, I think for sure we would continue with some form of it. So the question will be, is it going to be recurring in person, or is it going to be recurring with maybe, you know, is it every other year? Is it virtual some years? I think we'll see how this year goes. Everybody sign up and make it great.
Yep. Rachel, watch your mic rubbing on your skin.
Thanks, dude.
Yep. Navia asks, I grew up in a rural community and wanted to return to a rural community to practice medicine. This was the focus of my primary statement. I'm wondering if this is limiting my medical school options. Rachel, there are schools out there that have rural tracks and a rural medicine focus. I know a student last year, I think I was talking with, we were working with, grew up in rural Idaho, I believe, and applied to a few schools, only a couple schools, but they specifically had rural medicine tracks and rural medicine focus. And he got interviews at all the schools, and I think ultimately acceptances at all the schools because he's from a rural area. His focus is rural medicine, and that's what he's talking about, his passion being. Yeah. If you could put yourself in the shoes of an admissions committee at a school that doesn't have a rural medicine focus and you see an application come through, do you think that's a turnoff potentially for some schools?
I mean, it could be. So for example, I'm thinking there are some schools, especially in really major cities, that are focused on global health. And so global health, who's fighting over the camera? Global health could mean rural in another country. Right? It doesn't have to be rural in the US. So that could still be something that fulfills you. To me, the piece that's really interesting here, Navia, that you're not saying is you say that rural was the focus of your primary statement. Was rural also the focus of your school list? Right? Like you're wondering if it's limiting your medical school options, but you chose where to apply. So what I would really love to do, I mean, we're not going to have time today. I don't know if you want to schedule a one-on-one session with one of us, is look at your school list, because if you know you want to practice rural, then what does that mean for the schools that you chose, right? For example, UC Riverside focuses on Inland Empire. That's urban underserved. So my guess is it might be a turnoff for them because their mission is the inverse of yours. They're going after a completely different underserved community. So I don't know that it has to be limiting, but again, I think if you're only asking yourself about how the personal statement is impacting, then we're missing a huge part of this equation, which is what did your school list look like?
Yep. Jolie Floor 0116, how do you recommend that we prepare for interviews? Interviews are a huge part of this process, Dina. I know you are intimately familiar with them at all of the places you've been. It's this double-edged sword of students can be woefully underprepared and way overprepared potentially for interviews, and they sound like a robot. And here is what I practiced so much. What are your thoughts on preparing for interviews?
Well, I think the preparation starts with doing your research and knowing what type of interview format that school offers. So going into a school that, say, does MMI interviews and you don't know what an MMI is, that could be problematic and very jarring when you enter interview day. So preparing in terms of knowing what the interview style is going to be and what to expect is really important. Also, do a lot of mock interviews, a lot of practice. It's something that we also do here. You can work one-on-one with an advisor to do some mock interviews and prepare. And it's not just necessarily preparing in terms of running through questions. Having been part of a medical school's interview day, I can say all little details matter. There's so many things you have to think about in terms of like your location. Where are you going to conduct the interview? Do you have a quiet space in your home? Do you have to reserve a room at a library or another building? What are you going to wear? What kind of headphones do you have? Do you have good internet speed quality? All of those things factor in to preparing for interview day.
Yep. All that good stuff. And there's a book that may be out there, the Premed Playbook Guide to the Medical School Interview. Let's go check that out. Should we consider match lists when applying to medical schools? So this is a great topic that I'll tackle this conversation. I have always said match lists should not be considered. And when I have always said that, my rationale was always thinking about how students, maybe I made the assumption, are looking at match lists based on specialty. And they're looking at state school one and going, okay, I'm interested in orthopedics. What does their ortho match look like? And I'm looking at another school in my area and going, okay, what does their ortho match list look like? And to me, that doesn't work because number one, most students change their mind based on data that the AAMC puts out of the specialty that they want to go into. And for me, it's not the school that makes the match list in terms of specialties. It's the individual students going through their process, finding potential mentors, finding those relationships and networking during all of those rotations. I talked to a lot of physicians through e-shadowing, through our former podcast called Specialty Stories. And it seems like the far majority of physicians say they chose their specialty based on meeting a mentor and they just fell in love with that specialty. And so to me, looking at match lists based on specialty is not the right method. Now, I recently did a podcast interview with Trisha Pendergrast. I believe I'm pronouncing her name right. She is an anesthesia resident intern. And I met her on TikTok, and she was very adamant that match list is the most important part. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Because if you can't match after medical school, what's the point of going to medical school? I don't know if that episode is out yet. Maybe we can take a peek. But ultimately, her argument, which I think is a good argument, is your ability to match is ultimately, at the end of the day, what lets you be a physician. Like going to medical school in this country, you can't do anything. You have to match into at least an internship for most states. Or for a few states, and then at least doing a full 3 years of a residency to practice medicine in this country. And so after the conversation with her, I understand the importance of looking at match lists, not from a specialty standpoint, but from an overall match standpoint. But the problem with doing that is not every medical school has to report their match lists. And the schools that do report match lists potentially fudge their numbers a little bit, right? The students who match into a research year, well, that's not matching. So if you go and you look at their match list that they put out and they say 100% matching, and you see 3 students matching into research years, that's not matching. Those are students who either didn't apply or didn't match and are now doing a research year. And so you really have to understand how to look at these things to see what's going on. But ultimately, almost every school out there is matching students perfectly well, that it probably at the end of the day doesn't matter a ton. That's my opinion. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Dina.
I agree with you. I think it shouldn't be the deciding factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only place I see it as really major is when you're talking about US versus non-US, right? So for example, Caribbean schools will often cite match rates that, again, are maybe a little fudged because they're not talking about all of the people who went to med school and they didn't even allow to try to match because they knew they weren't going to be able to based on test scores or performance in clerkships or something like that. So yeah, obviously you want a school that has an overall good match rate, but I agree. I just think it's so early.
Yep. Kelsey McGraw, do medical schools take plans of clinical experience in a gap year into account? I own a business, so the only clinical I'm getting now is through hospice volunteer. I plan to get EMT certification in the gap. Rachel, this is interesting, right? So Kelsey asking a good question while simultaneously devaluing her time as a hospice volunteer, right, and potentially overvaluing an EMT certification.
Right. Agreed. Yeah. And so, Kelsey, maybe what we're missing here is the amount of time, right? You're saying the only clinicals you're getting through hospice volunteer. I love to see hospice volunteer work. It can be kind of sad and heavy, right? So to me, it shows a level of, emotional compassion that not everyone has, right? Not all medicine can be really exciting and rewarding. And sometimes it's just about making people's last days more comfortable. So I don't know if it's like Ryan commented, are you thinking that hospice has less value than EMT, or is this more about, you say you own a business, so maybe you're very limited with time, right? Maybe you're only doing hospice volunteer, 5 hours a month. Here's my big concern. When you say, does it count as part of the gap year? Do you mean gap year as the same as your application year? Because if that's the case, then you do have a problem. Right. And I always try to take gap year with a grain of salt, because lots of people take multiple gap years. So I don't know what the one gap year means to you. But if you're going to apply next May with, maybe you have a little bit of clinical, but it's not very meaningful. You don't have a lot of stories to tell about it. And then you're going to try to make the argument in your application, oh, but I'll be getting a lot of clinical before med school. Then I don't know how you're going to be able to answer the questions in the application, right? The personal statement is why medicine. Most people in their why medicine draw heavily on patient care experiences. Med schools want you to do shadowing and patient care experience before you apply, because they want to know that you've explored that career, that you've had good days and bad days, that that medicine can be exciting and rewarding, but there can also just be days where it's sad or it's gross, or people yell at you because they're stressed, even though you didn't do anything wrong. And so whether that's hospice work or EMT work, my concern is, if you don't have, there's not a magic number, but if you don't have a substantial amount of that, then I don't know how you're going to have a compelling application. So yeah, it could be a factor, right? Because you have to separate completed clinical from projected clinical. But I'm less worried about those hour counts and more just about, how strong is your application going to be if you don't have enough clinical to really answer why medicine?
Yes. And to ultimately answer the question, they do take it into account. A lot of schools will ask on their secondaries, what are your plans during your gap year? If you're not in school full time, what's going on? So they want to make sure. I think it's a common mistake when looking at an application for application renovation or for one-on-one students. Looking at an application, a student submits their application in June, and all of their activities basically look like they stopped in May. And there's no projected hours, there's no anticipated hours, there's no mention of anything meaningful that they're doing during the application cycle. To me, I think it's a potential huge red flag for medical schools of like, are you done? Like, you bored with us, but you're still applying anyway? Is this your parents telling you to do this? What's going on? Excellent
point. Yes, good point. Yeah, so the hours during the application year do matter. I just don't want them to be the only hours. Yeah. All right, sorry, I hid that comment. There we go.
Denista, what are the requirements for foreign pre-med students to sit for the MCAT and get admissions to medical schools in the U.S.? Same for everyone else. Just got to take the test, right? Got to be eligible on a student visa and all of that good stuff. So Stanford is relatively international student friendly, I think, if I remember correctly. And any huge different algorithms, without spilling any secret sauce, any big changes or differences just on a big picture scale that international students were viewed through the lens that they were viewed through, Dina?
There was the requirement that you had to have spent 1 year full-time studying in the United States or Canada or the UK. And that basically is about English proficiency. So there definitely were a lot of applicants who didn't have that. Also keep in mind, there are a lot of foreign applicants who attended high school internationally, where med school is built into like an extension of high school or their undergrad experience.
Yeah, that's most countries.
Yeah, you have to look at the requirements for every single medical school, because if you've matriculated to another medical school in any way, you likely are not eligible. So my advice is to definitely look at the requirements for international applicants for every single medical school, because not all of them accept international students.
Got it. Trinity asks, what is the purpose of asking, quote, any additional information you would like us to know on secondaries? Is there an expectation that we should always have something to say? Rachel, this is one of my common, like, not concerns, but just general frustrations that I have with this process of the kind of unwritten rules that there really are no optional essays unless it does specifically say, like, if you truly have nothing to say here, please don't say anything. And a lot of secondaries will have that sort of caveat to the prompt. But for this, any additional information, it's kind of required, although it's not required.
I agree.
What
Yeah,
advice do you give here?
Yeah, the only cases I think where optional is really optional is when it's, hey, did this happen to you? Does it apply to you? Right? Like there are some COVID questions that say describe COVID impact. That's not optional. There are some that say only answer this if you've had significant hardship. Switching from in-person to online is not significant hardship, right? Like, so there's some cases like that where it truly is optional. But yeah, Trinity, with this one, there is an expectation that you should have something to say. And this comes up a lot. You know, we do Application Academy. That's our group advising program. I see those students several times a week. This very question came up yesterday from someone, you know, who's getting coaching with us constantly. So this one does seem to be a stumper. What I think you need to do is expand your brain beyond your pre-med self, because what you're probably thinking to yourself is, I already wrote a personal statement about why I want to be a doctor. And I already wrote 15 activity essays about the way I'm spending my time, including lots of clinical. This is a chance to just give them some insight into you as a human, right? So, you know, maybe you grew up with a lot of siblings. Maybe you applied to Comus, so you didn't have a chance to do an other impactful essay. And this is a DO school, so now you have a chance to share some of the same information you put in your other impactful for AMCAS, where you want to talk about, you know, an immigrant experience or growing up in a home that was multilingual. Like it doesn't have to be a hardship, but it's just a chance to show a little bit more of yourself. And so what you might want to do if you're feeling really stuck is ask some of the people in your life who really love you, what's something about me that you're always excited to tell people about me, right? And see what they say. You might be surprised. Sometimes the things that we take for granted about ourselves are things that other people really think are really interesting and cool. And just because you've lived with it, it's not a big deal to you. So yes, I do think you should answer. I do not think it needs to be pre-med. And yeah, crowdsource, ask some friends and family. When you talk about me, what do you say? Because that might spark some ideas.
Yeah. So also some additional advice that I normally give students is look at the rest of the questions in the secondary. If they didn't ask, why are you interested in our school, there's potentially an opportunity to talk about why that school. If they didn't ask, why should we accept you? Or what diversity do you bring to our class, which I think are basically the same question. That's an opportunity to talk about kind of similar to Rachel's point about who you are as a person and what you're going to bring to the class. Fluffy Cookie says, hello all. I've registered for the Premed conference in Baltimore. I'm really excited and eager to meet everyone there. Thank you for your help and support. Oh, Fluffy Cookie. That's amazing. They have a Baltimore Ravens on top of a Dallas Cowboys star. I'm assuming that's what that is. So I'm a little confused. But they have the Baltimore connection in their avatar there.
So I'll just be going around looking at all the lanyards in October going, Fluffy, are you there?
Fluffy Cookie! Wrong type of conference, Rachel. Kelly asks, hello, MSHQ team. Thank you for the office hours. Should I notify schools when I update the application and resubmit, removing one letter writer? No. You should not. Raphael, I am on my computational biology PhD. My background has been very mathematical and only biological classes by option. I wonder, do medical schools look at this badly? No shadowing, a lot of research. Oh, Dina, this
It's confusing to me a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little confusing, but it reeks of this like assumption that medical schools are looking for a specific student, right? That you're not allowed to have this very interesting computational biology PhD and want to be a doctor, that you have to do general biology or chemistry or whatever. You have to do the same thing everyone else is doing, and that you're not allowed to veer off that path. So that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, yeah, like no shadowing, a lot of research. What about clinical experience? I think they're kind of two separate questions built into there. What do you think?
Yeah, the no shadowing concerns me. I think the computational biology and just a very heavy math background is fine. I think it doesn't, it doesn't, as long as you have your pre-med requirements completed and you have a thorough understanding of those science competencies, you can apply to medical school as an anthropology major, as a public health major, as a political science major. And I don't think that, med schools want diversity in their class, and that contributes to diversity of thought in the classroom. My concern with this question, Raphael, is the no shadowing, because assuming that you are going to enter medical school and not have interactions with patients or anything clinical concerns me. And also, shadowing tells medical schools that what goes on in the world of a physician and the day-to-day life of a physician. And I think that that's really important. And that's something I probably would focus on for applying.
You got it. Nithya, do medical school admissions give preference to students coming from top 10 universities? Dina, you immediately let out a groan there. I'm going to let you. Again, your background is perfect for this because you come from two very highly respected institutions. Do you think they're only looking at cream of the crop institutions to fill their classes?
They are not solely looking at cream of the crop institutions. Some of the best, applicants were, those students that came from other schools and
those
state
lowly state schools.
Everybody's path is different. I think medical schools have that conversation of, it's a 4.0 at Harvard, different than a 4.0 at not a top 10 university. And were the resources more plentiful at that university? I think, I think there's an expectation coming from a top school that you took advantage of what that school had to offer. Like, did they receive a lot of NIH funding? Were there like opportunities available to you that were not available to students that went to other institutions that you did not take advantage of? And to me, that would be a red flag.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. It kind of reminds me of, I don't know if it's a Tim Tebow quote specifically. I think he is known for the quote about hard work beats talent any day. Right. So to me, replace talent with name on diploma, right? Institutional name on diploma. And what you do to make yourself a good student is huge. And that kind of goes along with what I have said, which is go to a school that will make you great. Don't go to a great school.
Absolutely.
And so I think, yeah. I don't know.
How did you maximize your time there? What did you do?
Exactly. I think we have too much obsession with celebrity in this country, too much obsession with brand in this country, and institutional name I kind of throw under that brand as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I agree.
And I mean, there's such a correlation to income, right? So, even though a lot of those really, supposed top universities have, scholarships and waive tuition for students who, might not have income, ultimately the kind of people who are even in league to apply to those schools typically come from wealthy zip codes. So those are reputed schools for a reason, but also if med schools want diversity of thought, then that means not everybody should come from the posh suburb of a major city, right? We're going to need more diversity than that. And those universities tend to be populated with that. So I wouldn't fixate on a name brand.
Yep. Arul, hi, I'm going to be a volunteer for the crisis text line where I'll be messaging people who deal with mental health issues and suicide. Hopefully suicidal ideality, not suicide. Would ideality, ideation. I'm like, that's not the right word. Would this be considered clinical experience? So Rachel, this is an interesting question. I think crisis text hotlines, for the most part, historically, we would have said it's not clinical experience. And then this little thing called COVID happened. And it's like, well, what can students be doing during this time? And it's like, hey, this is kind of interesting to think about this. And then I kind of compare it, right? When I was a physician practicing, sending messages through the portal, which every physician loathes, the practice of having patients email them through their EMR, right? What's the difference, right? It's patient care, it's patient exposure. It just happens to be through this electronic media.
Yeah, and it seems like the answer keeps evolving, right? So I think 5 years ago in a pre-pandemic world, we would have said it's texting, it's not clinical. And then with the advent of COVID, not only did med schools start to be a little bit more flexible about remote learning and remote clinical, but we were doing a lot more telemedicine as a country, right? I mean, I had many of my doctor's appointments over Zoom. And I do think there's a big difference between Zoom and texting. This is something that I think, again, there's never going to be one answer in a monolith. Dina, having recently been in admissions, I'd love to have you weigh in too. But what I feel like I'm starting to hear from admissions officers that I've talked to is a swing back to texting's not ideal, right? I think there was a little bit more grace for it when it was maybe the only way you could get some clinical exposure. I still think it's a wonderful thing to do, especially if you're a night owl, because they are desperate for people to fill that kind of 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift wherever you are in your time zone. They need a lot of help in those hours. So if you're someone who's up late anyway and you've got that emotional bandwidth to give, I think it's a wonderful thing to do. But I certainly wouldn't want it to be your only clinical. I would hope that you would get some in-person experience too.
Yep. Dean, any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I think I agree with Rachel in terms of, like, I think schools gave some grace with that. I don't necessarily feel as though it's clinical. There's not a team of caregivers involved with you. It's just kind of you texting someone for help. So I think what's missing in terms of a clinical experience is that interaction with the care team and other providers. I think during the pandemic, it was very popular. I think a piece of advice, embarking on a volunteer experience with Crisis Text Line now would be maybe take it a step further. Are you promoting it? Are you helping to, get more people to sign up for it? Because it's a very popular volunteer experience, something that was very common that I read a lot on applications. So, if that's your only volunteer experience and you're hoping to categorize that as clinical, I probably would find something else to do in addition to it. Not devaluing it in any way. It just became a very popular mode to, serve others during the pandemic. And I think that now that the pandemic is over, maybe attach something else to that's in person.
Yep. Before we answer these last few questions, have there been any questions that hopefully the student's still here and we can give away a free MapTCon ticket? Any questions that stuck out for you all? Let's go ahead and answer the next one, and I'll let you guys scan through the list.
Yeah.
I'll tackle the next one solo. DG Connor Z. Any advice on getting back into the student mindset again if I've been out of college for 5 years? I currently work as a teacher and just finished all of my secondaries. Nervous about starting classes. So I didn't know this was the question. I struggled with this very specific thing when I started medical school because I had taken 3 years off between undergrad and medical school, and I forgot how to be a student. The kind of daily grind of being a student, and especially because I didn't really have to work super hard to get good grades at the University of Florida. Not a dig on the quality of education at the University of Florida, but I was a decent enough student in undergrad. And then med school hit me at a completely different level, and I really, really struggled starting out. So my advice is probably to just get back into a reading mindset. I think that was the biggest thing for me. I was never a good reader. I never read for fun or entertainment, anything like that. And so med school was a rude awakening because it's all reading all the time. And so I would probably just start digging into reading and retaining and potentially learning how to be very active with your note taking, with active learning, and trying to figure out that whole world. So that's my advice. DG Connor Z. All right. Have we found an interesting question?
Yeah, I put a comment I put one in the private chat. Just I wasn't sure if we wanted to say it out loud until we'd all weighed in.
Oh, I can't see the chat. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought maybe Trinity's question about the anything else secondary, because that's such a common question.
I liked that question.
So, hey, Trinity, if you're still here, email us at info@map.com. That's info@mappd.com. And just say, hey, I'm Trinity. I was at the Premed office hours just now, and I won a free ticket to MapCon.
Woohoo!
Woo! Thanks for your great question.
All right. I think we got time for one more, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, let's do. Okay, cool. You got it. You're good.
Would starting a small business help me stand out on my medical school applications? I will be starting classes in the fall as a freshman. Would starting a small business be a beneficial use of my time? Says Misa. Dina, I love this question. We had a conversation recently on another Premed office hours about the X factor in medical school admissions. I generally don't like this question of what's going to help me stand out, because I think the intentions are perverted, right? I'm going to choose something that's going to help me stand out versus I'm going to do something because I want to do it. What are your thoughts with this question and the answer behind it?
I don't think that you should do anything just because you think it's going to be beneficial for your medical school applications. And it depends what kind of small business. Are you starting like an eBay business, or are you starting, some sort of business where you're a translator or an interpreter for somebody? Those are very, very
dealer.
Those are very different. So, I think I don't really like this question either, because everything that you do should, in your preparation for medical school, should have the best intentions of, making you a better doctor someday, and a better caregiver. Not necessarily starting a small business is going to help me boost my resume. It's all the other things that go along with it. The research, the clinical, the volunteer experience, making an impact. So yeah, is this a beneficial use of your time? I don't know what the small business would be, so I really can't answer that question. But if it's in place of doing clinical or shadowing, then I would say no.
Yeah.
But more context would be needed.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I hear this a lot. Like you see it on TV shows, right? Like if you're Gilmore Girls fan, Paris starts SAT prep and she says, "Oh, it looks good on the resume." Like the resume isn't really a factor in med school admissions, right? You're not just listing activities and they're like, that one looks impressive. You're writing an essay about it. So if you're only doing something because you think it's going to impress someone, that's going to be a pretty lackluster essay. It's going to be very clear that you had no motivation other than impressing. If you follow your passions, then when you talk about your life experiences, we will see and feel your passion. Some of the best essays I've ever read in the activities section were things that had nothing to do with medicine. I talked to someone who founded a water ski club at her college. It was an amazing essay. Did it make her a better pre-med candidate? Well, it was just one factor, right? But it gave me insight into her outside of her pre-med self, right? So you just have to think about who you are and what you want to do.
Yeah. Love it. And that, my friends, is a wrap for Pre-Med Office Hours. Again, we are here almost every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. I generally am live on Instagram as well, Fridays at 11 a.m. Eastern. And don't forget that our whole team, as well as many amazing speakers and medical schools, will be at MappedCon October 6th through 8th. In Baltimore, Maryland, at the Inner Harbor, at the Hilton there. Amazing, amazing venue. We're going to have lots of students and a great time Friday night through Sunday afternoon, early afternoon. So go get your early bird tickets right now at mappedcon.com. I don't know why we say pre-med and pre-health conference. It's a pre-health conference. Covers both. Yeah. Awesome, friends. Thank you so much. Dina, Rachel, thank you for joining me today and sharing your amazing wisdom.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for